The UPSC exam is a lot like life. In the UPSC mains, as in life, if you do what everybody does, then you get what everybody gets. And as a matter of fact, almost everybody gets about average marks in the essay paper and in the mains score in general. And only a few exceptions get a lot more or a lot less than the average score. Most people fall within the medium range as depicted in this graph. This mountain that you see, this is the mountain of mediocrity, and that is where you are most likely to fall just because the law of statistics says so. And if you go with the default, then the chances of you landing up in the mountain of mediocrity is the maximum. And what I want to depict through this graph, as you can see, is that very few people lie on the extremes of either very high marks or either very low marks. Obviously, you want to be in the extreme of very high marks. What's interesting in this graph is that you see that there's a steep incline, and then there's the mountain where you can plateau. But the decline and the ascent to high marks is also very steep. So that means if you push beyond a certain threshold, then the increase in marks is going to be exponential, and that's what we will be trying to achieve, or at least achieve an understanding about in this video. It's easier said than done, though, because if you make the same mistakes which everybody makes, then you'll get the same result which everybody gets, and you remain stuck in the mountain of mediocrities. Which is why this video, I'll be talking about the most common mistakes, some fatal mistakes which people often commit in the UPSC exam, which I think deserve some clarification. Before you understand what you must do to get a super high score in the UPSC exam, you have to learn what not to do. And so we'll be talking about the 12 fatal mistakes to avoid in UPSC answer writing. This brings me to the first mistake, and this is a fundamental mistake which a lot of people make. And this is misunderstanding the type of essay which is required in the UPSC exam. Being confused about the type of essay to write in the exam is a common issue. People don't understand that when we go into writing essays in the UPSC exam, we are not there to write personal essays. You see, there are two types of essays, essentially. There are personal essays and there are analytical essays. Now, personal essays, as you might have guessed, as the name suggests, are about you. While applying to colleges, personal essays are sometimes part of the application. Say, for instance, if you were to write an essay about the most interesting and defining moments of your life, which defined you as a person and how they changed you, something like that, then that would be a personal essay. The essay topic expects you to share some information about yourself. Another example of a personal essay would be, who is your role model and why? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Why do you think you're a good fit for this college or for this job or whatever? The idea is that personal essay is meant to get a glimpse inside your mind, inside your intentions, character, and personality, and so on, and to judge your suitability for whatever it is that you're applying for. And this is not what we are trying to do in the essay paper of the UPSC exam. They do that in the interview. In the essay paper, they're testing for a certain set of linguistic skills, actually. And this is exactly the opposite of what you should be doing in personal essays. The essays which are asked in the UPSC exam are analytical, they're argumentative. What this means is that they're not about you, and you should therefore not share any personal information about yourself whatsoever. In fact, you should not even use the word I in your language, in the body of your essay. The purpose of analytical essays, like I mentioned, is to judge your intellectual capacity, your understanding of a topic, the way you express it, and how clearly you are able to do so. A certain set of cognitive abilities is tested when you're asked to write analytical essays. They are testing for your reasoning skills, your logical consistency, the way you structure your thoughts, the way you organize them, the way you use language and words to convey those meanings. But note that analytical essays can include all kinds of topics. It doesn't mean that the topic will be scientific. Analytical essay only refers to the type of writing that is expected. The essay topic could be philosophical or ethical or scientific or socioeconomic. That does not matter. The essay topic could be about sports or technology, crime, cooking, whatever. The point is that you personally are not supposed to become part of the narrative of that essay. And this brings me to the next mistake, which people often make, and that's using anecdotes. An anecdote is an experience or something that you have gone through personally, which you have learned from perhaps, or which you want to recite to support your argument, perhaps in an essay or something. This is personal information. It does not fit well into the analytical style of writing, which focuses on objectivity, like I just mentioned. Objectivity means a scientific, a data oriented approach to your arguments. Anecdotes are subjective, which is to say that only you know the truth of those statements or those claims which you make. In a nutshell, it is best to avoid anecdotes or any personal information altogether in the UPSC exam. So you don't want to start your essay saying something XYZ happened to me and I learned this and that and that. Do not bring yourself into the essay topic whatsoever. This directly leads me to the next mistake, a very common misconception, using unnecessary poems and quotations in the UPSC exam. Now, this is another huge misconception which you're better off avoiding. People are convinced that the essay should be poetic or romantically expressive in order to be good, but this couldn't be further from the truth. You see, poetry is a form of literary art where words are used in creative ways, not in the typical ways. They're used in creative ways, and they focus on a subjective experience. It depends on the type of poetry that we're talking about, but mostly it's about instilling an experience. Poetry is an art. And the idea is to appeal to the emotions and feelings. And this, unfortunately, adds no weight to your arguments in the essay, in the UPSC exam, and therefore does not give the examiner any reason to give you higher marks. You want to avoid this situation. Of course, this derives from the fact that you're going to be writing analytical essays, which are impersonal and objective. Another huge misconception is quotes. Should you use quotations in your essays? Quotations from somebody famous or whatever. Another huge misconception, which I think you're better off avoiding, adding quotations will not add much value to your essay. You see, because the examiner is trying to understand what you think about a topic, quoting somebody does not do that, does not convey that sense of independent thinking at all. The same goes for mythological references. When people begin their essays from Ramayana or Mahabharata or whatever, it makes no sense. And there's a very thin line between a mythological reference and a religious reference. And I think that's something which you can safely avoid. If we are playing with about 1,000 words in which we need to extract the maximum amount of marks, then why not just focus on the core content? Why not give the examiner what they want exactly? And that's why this is the mistake which you're better off avoiding. About quotations, I don't think that you should have to quote somebody famous in order to make your point in the essay. If your arguments are powerful and if they're logically consistent, then they will carry their own weight. They will have the effect of impressing the reader regardless of what Pandit Nehru or Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King once said about it. And sometimes, perhaps, quotations can be used to gain credibility. This is fine, of course. But it is much easier to gain credibility through factoids and data from credible sources. I think that's a much more direct and more effective approach. A quotation is, of course, is somebody's personal isolated comments on something that they said in some context or a speech or something. And without knowing the context around which it was said and why it was said, it is impossible to interpret the intentions of the speaker. We don't know why they said it when they said it, most of the time. And that's a risk that I think you should avoid. So avoid wasting time memorizing quotations about a topic in the hopes of you being able to fit it somewhere, because the chances of that are pretty slim. And this has been my experience over many years of preparation and attempts. What proves much better and much more valuable than quotations is the strength of your arguments. Analytical essays seldom gain value from poems or quotes or mythological reference. I'm not saying that these are taboo or that they should be avoided. It's not a crime to use them at all. I'm just saying that focusing on them and relying on them to get you a higher score is a mistake because it does not add that much value to your essay. Coming to the fourth mistake, and this is a tricky one because it takes some experience and some hit and trial to understand this one. You see, people don't realize that the experience of writing a timed essay is very different from the experience of writing an untimed essay. You must have experienced this yourself. The experience of writing an essay in the exam versus writing one in your study room in the comfort of your home are very entirely different circumstances and different experiences as a result of that. The examination experience is a lot more stressful. It is time bound, it is chaotic. You have a lot of things to have in your mind at the same time. You are unfamiliar, you're in unfamiliar surroundings. None of these are the issue when you're at home. So you need to know that your experience of time is also dependent on the kind of situation you're in. What I'm saying is that if you're in a stressful situation, then time will tend to elapse much faster than when you're relaxed. Have you ever noticed that when you're on a vacation or when you're having fun, then time seems to pass really quickly and it's over before you know it? But this does not happen when you're meditating or doing something which requires patience. And the same thing happens in examination. Time passes by really quickly, and that's something you need to prepare for. So preparing for a timed essay is different from preparing for an untimed one. If your professor, say for example, asks you to submit an essay within a week's time, then you have time to think about it, uh, move it around in your head, do some research about it, edit it, redraft it, so on and so forth. The UPSC, on the other hand, will ask you to write not one but two essays on unfamiliar topics within 3 hours. This means that you need to be prepared for that kind of situation. You need to prepare yourself for writing the types of essays which the UPSC is expecting you to write. The thrust of your preparation should be to get better at writing timed essays. The fifth mistake is choosing the wrong topic in the UPSC exam. And this is trickier to avoid than it might seem, and it's a sure short way of getting stuck under the mountain of mediocrity or worse. But why is it so important? Why is this seemingly small step to choose a topic among the list of choices that are given to you? Why is that so important? What makes it so critical? Well, the fact that your strengths and weaknesses are different from others, and so the best choice for you is going to be correspondingly different from the best choices of others. And then there is a psychological effect called the decision paradox, which might suck you in and which might kill your time. It might cause a lot of confusion. The third reason is that not choosing well may cause interference and it can distract you because the other options will keep popping up in your mind and you might get caught in thinking about the other choice which you might have probably picked and might have ended up with a better essay and so forth. Then a bad choice of topics, it's irreversible. Once you choose the topic, once you start working on it, once you've invested time, you cannot go back. It's a timed examination. And a bad choice becomes obvious only halfway through. It won't be obvious just when you start writing that you've picked the wrong choice. It's only when you're in the middle of it, then you realize that you're running out of points and things are not going according to plan, is that you realize that you might have landed yourself in a soup. The structure of your essay is dependent on the amount of clarity that you possess about a topic, and that's where choosing well makes a huge difference as well. And this will be spotted by the examiner. They'll get to know the quality of understanding that you bring to the essay, and they'll score you accordingly. A good choice of essay, on the other hand, if it's a well-made choice, if it's an intelligently made choice, can boost your score drastically. And the good news is that there is a tool which you can use to understand this, to diagnose, so to say, to find the best possible option for you. That's called the decision matrix. The decision matrix, it's a series of weighted scores which reflects your proficiency level on a given topic. This has been covered in detail in previous chapters. This is what it looks like. You can go back, refer to the older videos for this. Very helpful tool. The sixth mistake is using the wrong type of voice, is using the passive voice while you should be using the active voice. Take these two sentences for instance. The kids have cleaned the kitchen is active. The kitchen has been cleaned is passive. You want to use active voice in the UPSC essay. Using passive voice is not only grammatically more difficult, it adds more complexity to your statements, and it's best to avoid that. The simple and direct type of language that active voice allows is what we're looking for. Active voice is more concise than passive voice. It takes fewer words to express, and the meaning is conveyed more directly. Sentences written in the passive voice, that they can sometimes be too wordy, or they may lack focus. In the UPSC exam, less is more at times. And since you have a limited word count, you're only playing with about 1,000 words per essay. You need to avoid using passive voice, because to maintain consistency in passive voice over many statements and paragraphs that you'll be writing is not easy, linguistically speaking. It'll save you from a lot of entanglement, so just stick to active voice. Now, mistake number 7, one of the biggest mistakes, and I cannot stress this enough. No pre-writing, no rough work. People just directly jump into writing. I think that you could not do yourself a bigger misfavor than not doing rough work. Pre-writing or rough work includes brainstorming, thinking, choosing, uh, structuring your arguments, pretty much everything that goes into thinking before you actually start writing your main essay in the answer sheet. It includes bulleting points, drawing diagrams, or mind maps. And this is what it would look like on the rough work of your answer sheet if it's done correctly. And it's definitely the most important part of the essay. And not doing this, not doing and investing time in pre-writing is equivalent to committing a blunder. Pre-writing is something that you do before you start writing essays on your answer sheet, and the amount of forethought and structure which you create during pre-writing is directly going to translate into the quality of your final essay or the lack of it. So you need to watch out for this one. The next mistake, the eighth mistake, which I want to talk about, is not understanding the heart of the topic. This is, I cannot stress this enough. I think this is where the crux of your essay lies. You see, it's a fundamental mistake from which the rest of your mistakes begin. If the fundamental understanding of the topic in front of you is shaky, then it's going to reflect in the entire essay from the beginning to the end. If you do not have insight into the core issue of the topic, the resulting essay is going to be mediocre. That's unavoidable. It's inevitable. You can use the deconstruction technique to get to the heart of any topic in less than 60 seconds or less. For those of you who don't know, it's a technique of deconstructing, breaking apart the essay topic. An essay topic is usually made of 2 or 3 things. In deconstruction, we split it apart into the 2 or 3 main things that it is made up of. And then we ask, what is the relationship between these things? The understanding of this relationship is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the relationship and the heart of the essay. Your essay is meant to unravel and unfold this relationship in its various dimensions. Remember that the topic is not about, the essay is not going to be about thing 1, thing 2, or the 2 things it's about. The topic, the essay itself is going to be about the relationship between these 2 things. The understanding of this is critical. How to do that? We do that with the 4Q technique. It gives you a deeper understanding. We use 4 questions to deeply analyze any relationship, and it gives us a much better perspective on what we are dealing with. Another mistake which people often make, and sometimes perhaps it's inadvertent, people don't intend to make it, but it occurs, and that's repetition and redundancy. When you repeat something, or you stay on something longer than you need to in a 1,000-word essay, and so you need to avoid this at all costs. The way to avoid this is to do really good pre-writing, to know what you're going to do before you start writing. And I mean, there's a lot to be said about that. It goes without saying, but it takes some practice to get better at this. Repetition does not only reduce the value of your essay, but it also leaves the examiner bored, and the reader will start to get distracted. This brings me to the next mistake, and that's formatting mistakes. What kind of formatting or text is being inserted into your essay? Are there bullets? Are there numbers? Is there spacing? Is there underlining? All of these form formatting mistakes. It's a good idea leaving some space between paragraphs. It illustrates a transition, for instance. In your writing, provides a break between consecutive arguments or points. And since this is a paper and pen test, you should ensure that your paragraph spacing, the way you structure your paragraphs, is adequate to produce that effect. If you're moving from point to point, from argument to argument, it's best to change paragraphs and leave some space between them. And there are techniques to do this. Strategic smart spacing and the SOS cheat code in the Ultimate Cheat Book explain this in a lot of detail. Another important point associated with formatting is bulleting and numbering. Should you use bullets and points and bulleted numberings in your essay? Should there be points like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on? I think that it should be avoided, and it is an unnecessary risk if you're taking it. The essay is a formal piece of writing, you see. You're expected not to deploy shortcuts to organize your information. Bulleting and numbering is used to summarize and make something concise and make something highly analytical, understandable. This is not what you are expected to do. So it's best to avoid and not take this risk. Instead, I think what you should do is to use connecting words to organize and structure your essay. Instead of using points, instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, you would simply say firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly, and so on. There are many, many ways to do this. Connecting words can be very powerful and they can really save you and they can save the day, but only if you know how to use them. The next mistake is to focus on grammar much more than content. I understand that it's a test of language and focusing on grammar is something important. It's not something you can ignore, but focusing on it at the cost of content, at the cost of argument, at the cost of your substance is going to prove detrimental. And it's not going to fetch you a high score like you desire. Grammar is important in its own right, but it should not come at the cost of substance. If you think that your grammar or your command over language is not that great, and if you can be honest enough about that, then you need to try to eliminate complicated grammar. And the way to do that is to use shorter sentences. Use short, impactful sentences and use them all in active voice. Eliminate the need to construct grammatically complex sentences. Easier said than done, I know, it requires some practice, but I think that's the approach which you should take if you are weak in grammar. The other mistake is not revising and reviewing. Now, contrary to popular belief, reviewing, revising is not the rereading of your essay or underlining important points. It's a lot more than that. It is a golden opportunity to avoid blunders. You can use it to correct mistakes, and you can even use it to increase your score by as much as 20%. When you do so, when you do pre-writing, when you do revising and reviewing, if you do it properly, you increase the probability of spotting errors. And more importantly, sometimes you gain the opportunity, you gain the insight to insert those few wonderful words or those few wonderful sentences here or there, which can really take your writing to the next level. I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you in the next video.